Hi, Graham Vincent, violin maker and musician. It's Friday, and that's when I normally do my Q&As, so that's what I'm going to do today. I thought also, in addition to that, I'll just have a general witter about what I've been up to, so you can see what's going on as well. One important part of my business is obviously sending out those violins. So this is off to Ohio in the States. A couple of violins in there, the wormy chestnut ones. I'm always sad to see them go, but that's what makes the business work. So I'm kind of kicking my heels a little bit this morning, hanging around waiting for the courier to arrive to collect those violins. I stuck the front on the 15-inch viola yesterday, and it's looking and sounding good. And what I mean by that is that the sort of response you get from the body. So this is clearly a lot louder and also has a much lower resonance. And I know this one doesn't have a sound post in it, but in my experience, it won't account for the whole of that difference. So it's got a nice low kind of body sound to it, but it's also, that's the washing machine in the background, by the way. But it's also got a good, you can hear a lot of the high frequency from the body as well. So I've high hopes for this one. It should be nice. Brian Timmons, thank you for elaborating further on your answer in the previous video. That's a pleasure, Brian. It's not a question. Okay. Mick Carr 2744. Thanks for answering the question. I thought it might be done by a router. I was thinking of doing something similar but with a template. Okay, yeah. Mick Carr was asking about how I sort of reduced the edge work down before I actually start doing the carving. How I make that little edge detail. And I was saying I did it using a sort of effectively an overhead pin router type system, not guided, done freehand. And I was also saying it's not the ideal method and I'm not really happy with it and I want to change how I'm doing it. But actually this pops up again in a minute. Brennan985, this is a really interesting question actually. How do you place your F-holes on your violins and violas? And as he says, violas, we can say that now, yep. Right, okay. There are certain things which you can't really argue with. On a violin, there's, the center of the F-hole vertically is where you put the nicks, and those nicks want to be a certain distance. The body stop is generally defined. And so that kind of sets the up and down position. You have control over how long or short you want your F-holes to be. Mine are fairly standard, perhaps slightly longer, a tad longer than standard, but not, fractional. You don't really want to be changing the distance between these eyes. For me, that should be pretty much exactly the width of the base of the bridge. And there's a reason for that, and that is that I want there to be sort of structure running through for the bridge to stand on. I don't really want the bridge to be floating on something that's only supported at one end, if that makes sense. I think it's also important for the sound transmission, for the part of the sound that is carried into the rest of the instrument. Then it starts to get a little bit more a matter of personal ideas and personal whims. So these are my ideas and whims, if you like, my fancy. I think, the relation between this hole here and the outside of the body is far, far less important than what's going on here. As far as I'm concerned, this area here is the most critical part of the violin in terms of making sound. So I let the shape of that govern the angle of the F holes and the position of these. Having said that, I do end up with something that looks fairly standard. On this viola, because it's a fairly small viola, but because obviously violas sound better if they have a decent string length, the strings on this are longer in proportion to the body than the proportion of string to body on a standard violin. This isn't the case with all violas, but it's the case with the one I've designed here. And the upshot of that is that these F holes are slightly further down the body than they would be on a violin. And you can see that in the relationship between this bottom hole here and the side there. On a violin, you would expect that distance to be less. If you can see that, you see it's a really short distance between that and the side of the body. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why that's often susceptible to little splits just there. What else? I think that pretty much covers it in terms of the F-hole size shape. In terms of the actual design of the F-holes, it's just I've kind of come to a shape that I find appealing, really. As you'll see from this, I don't put the nicks in until the neck is on, the fingerboard's on, and then I can work out to the millimetre the position of the bridge according to the desired string length. With this particular viola, because viola string lengths aren't as defined, I mean, I guess there's no reason why I shouldn't have put the nicks in at an earlier stage, but I haven't anyway. I'll do that later. Hope that answers that question. Brennan985 asks another question. Is that vodka in the background of the Viola Part 4 video? No, it wasn't. It was an old speckled hen, no, old crafty hen bottle of beer, empty bottle that is, which I used to keep water in to top up the hide glue and the water bath as I'm working. Nice idea though. How often do you make non-instrument things like furniture, boxes, knickknacks? I do occasionally, and I'm just going to run around and show you some of them. This thing, almost certainly, but it's a very long story. I made it when I was working for a company and then bought it later on. Things like the shelves, obviously, but who doesn't? Then stuff like this little tea table, complete with its wooden hinges. It's difficult doing this with one hand, but yeah, I can use these wooden hinges in there, all cut out of one piece. I also try to make a stool once every 10 years, so they're all over the house. There are things like this. This was for my daughter. Bit of carving. And this stool based on a seamstress's stool. I made that a year or two ago. And stuff like a little bit of sculpture as well. First violin. A bit of mucking around with old brass instrument parts to make this candlestick. Bit of painting and drawing. Lots of DIY stuff. All sorts really, like this is one of mine. I like that shape with the line, hard line running down the back. I don't know if I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever do that, but I liked it. Sculpture. And a little bit of pottery I've done. Including some which I fired in a fire pit, which I dug in the ground in the garden and used sawdust from the workshop. To answer your question about how often I make them, not very often, in all honesty. What are the dimensions of your little baby plane bodies? Right, this is the one that you will have seen me using most, I suspect, of the tiny ones. I tend to use one quite large brass one, one medium-sized brass one, and then, despite the fact that I've got quite a choice of others, I seem to gravitate back towards this one all the time. This is one I made when I was at college, so 40 years ago, basically, I made this, and it's had a lot of use. And it is, I'm afraid we're working in millimeters. It's 27.5 millimeters long by 13 millimeters wide by what's that? Yeah, 10.5 millimeters height of the body, and it's still got the blade I made for it originally. I don't know if you can see that or not, which is just a metalworking hacksaw blade. I did make a new wedge for it a few years ago. So yeah, that's that one. Hope that helps. If you make the clamps you use to glue the body together, but for the larger viola, assuming taller ribs, can you show how you do it? Oh, right, okay, yeah. So, I mean, for gluing the body together, I used these spool clamps. I didn't make these. If I do go ahead and make the 16.5-inch viola, which is looking quite likely, then these absolutely will not be, they will not be long enough. So yeah, I'll show you how I make them. Why not? They're fairly simple, but I'm more than happy to do that. Monty Latham. Well, Graham, I have a multitude of questions building up, so here goes. Could you include the thumb planes in the gouge sharpening video? Yeah, sorry about that. I seem to have missed that one. I mean, basically, I did a little short about how to sharpen gouges. Maybe I should do the same for thumb planes. You route the edges to about 4 millimeters, but how far in? We're back on this question about routing the edge down. Well, in my case, if you look at I don't know how well you'll pick this up, but if you look at the shape that I actually like, the sort of the landscape, the topography of my arching, I like having a nice broad flat, because I believe that allows more flexibility. And I personally believe some flexibility in the body, the freedom for the front and back plate to vibrate should they wish to independently, is important. I know it's not the whole story of what's going on. I know with some frequencies everything's going. I appreciate all that, but I like to have that in there as well, and it seems to work for me. So that means I can have, it's some way in before you're back up to the height of the side. So, for example, if I look here, I could make the flat 20 mil there and still have room to spare. Here, in the middle of the C bounce, it's probably 12 mil would be a sensible maximum. Whereas over here, well, literally I could make them 35 millimeters, a little bit less on the ends. So yeah, the pattern that I use is just by eye, but it tends to be sort of fairly tight here, widening out. Does that answer that one? Hopefully. Can you explain how the wedges work on your cradle? Let me go and get it. Right, let's start with this one. This is a really rough and ready cradle that I made probably 35 violins ago. Yeah, I've just got a cutout, which, going back to that previous question about the edge, that's large enough to take the raised section after I have cut the edge down to 4mm. But then these are just two pieces which are just sat on the surface and are just held down with screws. In practice, I only adjust this side, which is why I've got the slotted holes in here and washers under the screws, and these are just screwed down. But basically, I put the top or back, whichever way up I'm working on it, into there, and then just tighten that side up against it. I've shown you this before, you'll like this, but basically just a very simple bandsaw cut circular piece screwed to that. Then you can see how this works. Two loose pieces held loosely screwed to this cross piece, clearance hole through that screwed onto that block, and that means you can put this in the vise and grip, and it works really well. I would say, because this is at a diagonal, it tends to be easier to turn it around in the vise one way rather than the other. So that's the first one of the two cradles. Then, because I was working on this viola, and it was too large for that one, I kind of started to make this. I will modify it when I'm ready. I will just simply put a second deck on it and alter these. But at the moment, the way it works is those wedges they're not wedges. I don't know if you can see that. They're like H pieces on their side. So they sit within that slot, and each one has a clearance hole through it, and then a wood screw going into this. So I can just simply with a screwdriver adjust these in and out. It took me 10 minutes on the bandsaw to do all of the work for this. So it's really simple and easy, and I use the same system for holding it in the vise. Worked really well. It works really well. But as you may have seen, I do actually like a lot of the time to work on the plates, you know, when I'm carving out the inside, actually just loose on the bench, just on a piece of carpet. What I do, however, is I have a sort of a stop, so that I'm not having to hold, you know, physically hold the plate back against my planing. I just rest it against the stop. So that's how I tend to do that. Hope that helps. Have you ever watched Stradivarius Bill? No. I would like to see you gluing up violins. Well, I think we've been overtaken by events, because that was actually this, as you probably, as I know you are aware, I just did that on the last one, part 4 of the 15-inch viola build. I'll end it for now. So much I need to learn, don't we all, Monty? We're all still learning, I hope. I've been making a lot of my own tools and using new ones to make them with as practice. I'm greatly enjoying it. Yep, fantastic. Stash Manley 4418. Your plans for violins look fine to me. Thank you. Not horribly concerned about copying the Strad exactly. No, well, you know my thoughts on that one. Use other people's violins as a starting point and build your own violin. That's my view. Just want to make a viola because it fits me, and my grandfather used to make violins. Wow, that's nice, isn't it? So I want to see if his genes passed on to me. No, I'm afraid you're going to have to learn it all yourself, basically. That's my... also using local source wood from my neighbour's maple tree. That is wonderful. At MOKE. That's a name I'm not familiar with. Okay. Hi Graham, can you add the sound bass bar template cross section on your violin plans, please? I had assumed the bass bar was flat, but they seemed tuned to each violin top. Can you show or explain how to do this, please? Okay, good question. So the bass bar ends up on the bass side of the bridge, so to speak. So on a violin under the G, and the foot of the bridge should stand on the bass bar, really. And because the foot of the bridge is standing there, I make that the thickest part. So on a violin, obviously the front at that point is angled, so I make the shortest distance 12.5. So the uphill side, cross section wise, I make 12.5. So the other side is longer than 12.5, if that makes sense. So that's how I set the height of the bass bar there. And what I generally do is, from that I draw a line, straight line down to about 4 mil at each end. Well, when I say I draw it, I never do now. I just simply mark that 12.5 mil, get in there with a paring chisel and take some timber out. So I start by having, so the bottom of the bass bar is curved, and then I've got my 12.5 mil, and then I've got these. What I do then is I will actually scoop those slightly, and I'm not tuning it musically. What I do, I tune it for strength. So I'm looking for something which I believe is going to be strong enough, and again, that's just down to gut feel. And again, the way I do the tops, I think, applies to this. I tend to take them down until I start to worry about it. So to reiterate, I don't tend to tune them musically or to a note. I tune them to what I believe is the right degree of flexibility and response. And then I don't leave them in cross section. I don't leave them square on top. I actually tend to do sort of like a rough catenary arch kind of shape, just purely by eye. And the bit at 12.5 mil doesn't end up as a point, because that little triangle at the top is pointless. It ends up as a bit of a curved section, if that makes sense. Gervais Gallant, thanks for another Q&A. I don't have a question this week. That's the washing machine on spin. Sorry about that. But perhaps a little suggestion I'm sure would appeal to a lot of builders, both new and old. You've already done a video or two on using rich light to make a fingerboard, but wondering if you might sometimes devote a video to actually creating the board. If that's not possible, maybe you could answer a few questions about the process, like where you get the blanket size, how long it takes to get through the process, how hard it is on the tools, and suggestions about glue. I think you use CA, but is it the runny kind or just thickly applied, etc.? Thanks again. Okay, Gervais Gallant, next comment. Oops, I see that you already have such a video. It's number 57. Sorry I missed this, not a problem at all. But one question, why are you sanding down to the cut line rather than using the bandsaw or a saw? Sorry, I don't understand that question. I'm not sure. I'll have to go and watch that, and I haven't yet. But yeah, I will revisit fingerboards. I'm probably going to be using a slightly different material for this viola, because not that I don't enjoy using rich light, it's just that as you probably realise by now, I am perpetually trying out new things and always on the hunt for improvement. So that's what that's about. Poppy K1431, have you made a 5-string fiddle? No, but I really, really, really want to. If someone could please order one, I shall crack on and do it. I'm quite tempted to make one for myself. Maybe one based on that on the guitar-shaped violin sort of pattern. We'll see. needs to be done, doesn't it? Order one, please. Andrew Parish 437. Hi Graham, what would be your go-to strings? Right. Two really spring to mind. First of all, I really like prim strings. They sound marvellous. I use them a lot of the time. They're on here. They are steel strings, but they have a warmth. And they last for ages. When I was playing on the Queen Mary II last summer, we did 60 gigs on the ship, and I took a violin with me that I'd done about 10 gigs before I got there, and then did a few afterwards as well. So 70 plus gigs on one set of strings, no problem at all, which is exceptional, really is. So I like them. They're not expensive, and they seem to work across a variety of violins. Now I realise classical players may balk at that, so my go-to classical string would be the let's get this right, it's the Larsen Il Canone, which is a beautiful sounding string, really nice. Yeah, for me, beats Eva Perazzi into a cocked hat. However, a lot of people are more interested in the name, and you just have to recognise that sometimes a client isn't going to be, they're not going to be amenable to suggestion about what string type, and so always ask if they have a preference. And if you know that your client is always going to be using D'Addario Helicourt or, for example, Eva Perazzi, then set the violin up with those. Makes great sense. Right, Stash Manley 4418. Hi there, Graham. I tried to contact you on your website so you would have my contact information for later. It keeps telling me that I am a robot or something. What do I need to do? Well, I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Some people seem to be able to get through quite happily, but Graham Vincent Violins @gmail.com. It's no secret. Yeah, you can always get in touch that way. No promises about whether I'll reply or not, but Kieran Nolan 8859. Hi Graham, thanks for all the videos. Thank you. Oh, okay, so I ought to say I've now moved on to the last video I did, which was the part 4 of the viola build. So I was going to just have a look at some of the comments on there. So these are comments as much as questions. So yeah, to continue Kieran's comment, I've seen someone using heat lamp to help keep the glue soft and prolong gelling time. Yeah, I have used a heat lamp before. Just basically, if the wood is at a nice temperature, then obviously it will take longer for the actual hide glue to gel, so you have a bit more open time. I also use a hairdryer. I've got this little hairdryer in the workshop. I use a hairdryer for the same thing, sometimes just to warm the wood up, especially in the winter months, just to give me a little bit more time. I don't tend to do that for the operation of putting the front or the back onto the ribs, which is what I was doing in the video. I tend to go down the route of using, well, I'm sure you may have seen the video. Basically, I just painted on the glue both faces, it gelled, and then I sort of put the thing together, put some clamps in place, made sure I was happy with everything, and then undid one section, and then using a hot knife with some glue on it, went round and just remelted, reactivated the glue, and then I was able to cramp down that section really quickly. And I like doing it that way for a couple of reasons. It means you can see that you've covered all the areas that need glue with glue. It allows you to make sure that that glue has penetrated well into the end blocks and what have you. And I do like not having to panic gluing things together. It means you can do a better job, which is what we're always trying to do, and be certain that it's worked. I mean, I did have a glue failure, which someone had to have sorted on a violin recently, and that was, I think, because I had actually not done this. I'd actually sort of put the glue on and put them together. So, I mean, this is a technique that I used in the past, and it's one I've gone back to because I think this gives the very best way of making sure that you've done the job properly. DIY Dark Matter. Hi Graham, nice job buddy. Have you ever thought about using a heat gun to reactivate the glue? Yeah, I have thought about it. Like I say, I've used a hairdryer to warm the timber beforehand, but I couldn't use a heat gun for this operation because although it might be okay where you've just got the linings, where the heat doesn't have to get in very far, on the top block and the bottom block, you know, the heat would have to get in that sort of distance to do anything. So using a hot knife is just simply the easiest way to do it. Monty Latham, thanks Graham, pre-painting both sides and letting it gel makes it all make sense. That was the missing link for me. You're going to make a Violinmaker out of me yet. Let's hope so. That's the point of all this. Brian Timmons, TX. Interesting. I suppose the advantage to this method is that you don't need to move as fast during the glue up. That is certainly an advantage. The other one, as I say, is because it gives you time to actually get things positioned the way you want. Fireman 9143. How are you maintaining your glue temperature? Is warmish water enough to work with? I mean, the whole process of gluing up, took a couple of minutes, I guess. So that was boiling water, taken off the heat. So it was still far too hot to put your hand in, for example. So it's as long as it's warm enough to actually sort of undo the gel, to melt the gel, then it's warm enough. It's interesting, people seem to be very hung up about glue temperatures, and they forget that the glue is made in the first place by just boiling and boiling and boiling to render down animal matter, so to speak, to produce hide glue. So when people say you shouldn't boil it, I'm slightly suspicious, about that. I think what you can't do is heat it directly, which is something completely different. So in a water bath, temperature-wise, it's probably 70 or 80 degrees or something like that. It seems to work fine. Using, as I say, the knife in the glue and then also in the hot water. I mean, the fact that I had hot water which I was using to heat the knife, but I also had the glue still in its container, and that glue was a long way off setting, so I knew that temperature was perfectly adequate to keep glue melted, because there was the proof. I seem to be dwelling a little bit on this question, but it's quite an interesting one. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Hope you've enjoyed all of those. Look after yourselves. See you soon, folks. Bye.